Imagine being in a relationship where you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing when your partner will suddenly become distant or clingy. Or picture this. You're the one who's always initiating conversations, making plans, and trying to get your partner to open up, but no matter how hard you try, they just seem to be pulling away. It's a frustrating and confusing experience, and it's one that millions of people face every day. In fact, a study by psychologist Dr. Sue Johnson from the University of Ottawa found that approximately 60% of adults have an insecure attachment style, which can lead to all sorts of problems in their relationships. But here's the thing. Most people have no idea that their attachment style is even a thing, let alone that it's secretly controlling their relationships. This lack of awareness is staggering, especially when you consider the fact that our attachment styles are formed in early childhood based on our interactions with our primary caregivers. According to Dr. Mary Ainsworth, a renowned psychologist from the University of Virginia, our attachment style is shaped by the way our caregivers respond to our needs, and this can have a lasting impact on our relationships throughout our lives. For example, if our caregivers were consistently responsive and nurturing, we're more likely to develop a secure attachment style, which is characterized by feelings of safety, security, and trust. On the other hand, if our caregivers were inconsistent or neglectful, we may develop an insecure attachment style, such as an anxious or avoidant style, which can lead to all sorts of problems in our relationships. A study by Dr. Philip Shaver from the University of California, Davis, found that people with an anxious attachment style are more likely to experience anxiety and depression in their relationships, while those with an avoidant style are more likely to struggle with intimacy and emotional connection. Now, you might be wondering what this has to do with you, and whether your attachment style is secretly controlling your relationships. The truth is, most of us are completely unaware of our attachment style and how it's impacting our relationships. We might notice that we tend to attract a certain type of partner, or that we always seem to end up in the same kinds of relationships, but we rarely stop to think about why this is happening. But the fact is, our attachment style is like a blueprint for our relationships, shaping the way we interact with our partners and influencing the way we experience intimacy, conflict, and emotional connection. And if we're not aware of our attachment style, we can end up stuck in a pattern of negative relationships without ever realizing why. So, how can you tell if you're stuck in a negative pattern and if your attachment style is secretly controlling your relationships? One sign is that you always seem to attract partners who are emotionally unavailable or who have a hard time opening up to you. This can be a sign of an anxious attachment style, which is characterized by a deep-seated fear of rejection and abandonment. Another sign is that you tend to sabotage your relationships, either by pulling away or by becoming overly clingy. This can be a sign of an avoidant attachment style, which is characterized by a fear of intimacy and emotional connection. According to Dr. Mario Mikulincer from the Interdisciplinary Center Herzliya, people with an avoidant attachment style often struggle with emotional regulation and may use avoidance as a way of coping with their emotions. As we explore the different attachment styles, it's essential to keep in mind that these styles are not fixed and that we can change and grow over time. However, this requires a deep understanding of our attachment style and a willingness to confront the underlying fears and insecurities that are driving our behavior. For example, if you have an anxious attachment style, you may need to work on building your self-esteem and developing a sense of security and safety in your relationships. This can involve practicing self-compassion, developing healthy communication skills, and learning to regulate your emotions in a more effective way. On the other hand, if you have an avoidant attachment style, you may need to work on developing your emotional awareness and learning to open up to your partners in a more vulnerable and intimate way. The good news is that it's never too late to change, and that by becoming more aware of our attachment style, we can start to break free from the negative patterns that have been holding us back. This can involve seeking out therapy or counseling, practicing self-reflection and self-awareness, and developing a greater understanding of our emotions and needs. It can also involve learning to communicate more effectively with our partners and developing a more secure and healthy attachment style. According to Dr. Sue Johnson, this can involve learning to recognize and challenge our negative thoughts and behaviors, and developing a more compassionate and empathetic approach to our relationships. As we continue to explore the different attachment styles, it's essential to keep in mind that each style has its own unique characteristics, and that understanding these characteristics is key to developing a more secure and healthy attachment style. For example, people with a secure attachment style tend to be more resilient, more adaptable, and more able to navigate conflict and challenges in a more effective way. They also tend to have a more positive and optimistic outlook on life, and are more likely to experience happiness and fulfillment in their relationships. On the other hand, people with an insecure attachment style may struggle with anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues, and may have a harder time forming and maintaining healthy relationships. One of the most interesting things about attachment styles is the way they can impact our relationships, often in subtle but profound ways. For example, people with an anxious attachment style may become overly dependent on their partners and may struggle with feelings of jealousy and possessiveness. They may also have a hard time trusting their partners and may become overly critical or demanding. On the other hand, people with an avoidant attachment style may pull away from their partners and may struggle with intimacy and emotional connection. They may also have a hard time opening up to their partners and may become overly focused on their own needs and desires. As we explore the different attachment styles, it's essential to keep in mind that each style has its own unique strengths and weaknesses, and that understanding these strengths and weaknesses is key to developing a more secure and healthy attachment style. For example, people with a secure attachment style tend to be more confident, more self-assured, and more able to navigate challenges and conflicts in a more effective way. They also tend to have a more positive and optimistic outlook on life, and are more likely to experience happiness and fulfillment in their relationships. On the other hand, people with an insecure attachment style may struggle with self-doubt, anxiety, and other mental health issues, and may have a harder time forming and maintaining healthy relationships. The implications of attachment styles are far-reaching and can impact not just our romantic relationships, but also our friendships, our family relationships, and even our relationships with ourselves. By understanding our attachment style, and by learning to develop a more secure and healthy attachment style, we can improve our relationships, increase our sense of happiness and fulfillment, and live a more authentic and meaningful life. And that's exactly what we'll be exploring in the second half of this video, as we delve deeper into the different attachment styles and explore the ways in which they can impact our relationships and our lives. So, let's take a closer look at the 4 signs that you're stuck in a negative pattern and that your attachment style is secretly controlling your relationships, and see if we can't start to unravel the mystery of why you always seem to attract the same types of partners and why you always seem to end up in the same kinds of relationships. And as we do, you might just start to realize that the way you experience relationships is not just about the other person, but about your own attachment style and the ways in which it's shaping your interactions, your emotions, and your deepest desires. And that's when things start to get really interesting. Because when you understand your attachment style, you can start to make changes and start to develop a more secure and healthy attachment style, one that will allow you to form deeper, more meaningful connections with others, and to live a more authentic, more fulfilling life. And that's exactly what we'll be exploring as we continue to examine the ways in which our attachment styles can impact our relationships and our lives. And as we do, you might just start to realize that the key to unlocking happier, healthier relationships is not about changing the other person, but about changing yourself and your own attachment style. And that's a really powerful realization, one that can change everything. And that's where we'll pick up in the second half of this video, as we explore the ways in which you can start to develop a more secure and healthy attachment style, and start to form deeper, more meaningful connections with others. So, now that we've explored the basics of attachment styles, let's dive into the 4 signs that you might be stuck in a pattern that's holding you back. The first sign is a deep-seated fear of intimacy, which can manifest in a tendency to pull away from your partner or loved ones when things start to get too close. This can be rooted in an anxious or avoidant attachment style, where you may have learned to associate closeness with rejection or abandonment. For example, imagine you're in a new relationship and everything is going great, but as soon as your partner starts to get clingy or affectionate, you start to feel suffocated and pull away. This can be confusing for your partner, who may not understand why you're suddenly distant, and it can lead to a push-pull dynamic that's hard to break. Research by Dr. Sue Johnson, a leading expert on attachment and relationships, has shown that this fear of intimacy can be especially damaging in romantic relationships. In her study, she found that couples who were able to create a sense of safety and security in their relationship were more likely to have a fulfilling and lasting connection. But if you're stuck in a pattern of fear and avoidance, it can be hard to create that sense of safety, and you may find yourself stuck in a cycle of push-pull that's exhausting for both you and your partner. The second sign is a tendency to people-please, which can be a hallmark of an anxious attachment style. When you're people-pleasing, you may find yourself constantly trying to meet the needs of others, even if it means sacrificing your own needs and desires. This can be a way of trying to avoid rejection or abandonment, but it can also lead to feelings of resentment and burnout. For example, imagine you're in a friendship where you always say yes to your friends' requests, even if it means putting your own plans on hold. You may feel like you're being a good friend, but deep down, you may be seething with resentment and feeling like you're not being seen or heard. According to research by Dr. Kristen Neff, a pioneer in the field of self-compassion, people-pleasing can be a major obstacle to building healthy and fulfilling relationships. In her study, she found that individuals who practice self-compassion were more likely to have positive relationships and better emotional well-being. So, what can you do to break free from people-pleasing and start prioritizing your own needs? One practical step is to start saying no to requests that don't align with your values or goals. This can be scary, especially if you're used to being a people-pleaser, but it's a powerful way to start setting boundaries and taking care of yourself. The third sign is a tendency to attract partners who are emotionally unavailable, which can be a hallmark of a disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment style. When you're attracted to someone who is emotionally unavailable, you may find yourself constantly trying to get their attention and affection, even if it means sacrificing your own emotional well-being. This can be a way of trying to recreate the patterns of your childhood, where you may have had to fight for attention and affection from a caregiver. For example, imagine you're in a relationship with someone who is always busy or distracted, and you find yourself constantly trying to get their attention and affection. You may feel like you're not good enough or that you're not worthy of love, but deep down, you may be trying to recreate a pattern that's familiar to you. The fourth sign is a tendency to self-sabotage, which can be a hallmark of a disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment style. When you're self-sabotaging, you may find yourself constantly undermining your own success or happiness, even if it means sacrificing your own goals and desires. This can be a way of trying to avoid feelings of rejection or abandonment, but it can also lead to feelings of frustration and stuckness. For example, imagine you're working towards a big goal, but just as you're about to achieve it, you start to feel anxious or overwhelmed and you sabotage your own efforts. You may feel like you're not good enough or that you're not worthy of success, but deep down, you may be trying to avoid the fear of rejection or abandonment that comes with achieving your goals. So, what can you do to break free from these patterns and start building healthier relationships? One practical step is to start practicing self-compassion and self-awareness. This means paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and being kind and understanding towards yourself when you make mistakes. It also means recognizing when you're stuck in a pattern and taking steps to change it. Another practical step is to start setting boundaries and prioritizing your own needs. This means learning to say no to requests that don't align with your values or goals, and being clear and direct about what you want and need from others. Finally, it means seeking out supportive relationships and community, where you can find people who will support and accept you for who you are. In terms of real-life examples, imagine you're in a relationship where you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing when your partner will blow up or become distant. You may feel like you're stuck in a pattern of fear and anxiety, but by practicing self-compassion and self-awareness, you can start to recognize when you're people-pleasing or self-sabotaging and take steps to change it. You can start to set boundaries and prioritize your own needs, and seek out supportive relationships and community where you can find people who will support and accept you for who you are. According to research by Dr. Mario Mikulincer, a leading expert on attachment and relationships, individuals who are able to develop a sense of security and safety in their relationships are more likely to have positive and fulfilling relationships. In his study, He found that individuals who were able to develop a sense of security and safety were more likely to have better emotional regulation and were less likely to engage in self-sabotaging behaviors. This is because when we feel safe and secure, we're more likely to take risks and be vulnerable, which is essential for building deep and meaningful connections with others. In addition to practicing self-compassion and self-awareness, it's also important to seek out supportive relationships and community. This means surrounding yourself with people who will support and accept you for who you are, and who will encourage you to take risks and be vulnerable. It also means being open to feedback and criticism, and being willing to learn and grow from your mistakes. By taking these steps, you can start to break free from the patterns that have been holding you back, and start building healthier and more fulfilling relationships. In conclusion, recognizing the signs that you're stuck in a pattern of attachment can be a powerful step towards building healthier and more fulfilling relationships. By practicing self-compassion and self-awareness, setting boundaries and prioritizing your own needs, and seeking out supportive relationships and community, you can start to break free from the patterns that have been holding you back. If this helped you see yourself differently, subscribe. I post new psychology insights every single day. And if you want to go even deeper, check the link in the description for Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It changed how millions of people think and act.